The jungle canopy swallowed the sky, leaving only fractured beams of sunlight to pierce the thick green gloom. Sergeant Jack Holloway wiped the sweat from his brow, his fatigues already soaked through. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and rotting foliage, a constant reminder of the unforgiving terrain. The Bravo team moved in silence, their boots sinking slightly into the soft ground with each cautious step. Behind Holloway, Private Danny Reyes adjusted the strap of his rifle, his dark eyes scanning the underbrush. "Sarge, you ever get used to this heat?" he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. Holloway didn't turn, his gaze fixed ahead. "No, and you won't either." Lieutenant Mark Reynolds, the team's fresh-faced officer, checked his map for the third time in as many minutes. "We're 3 clicks from the LZ," he said, his voice tight. "Command wants eyes on that ridge by dusk." Corporal Tom Doc Harris, the unit's medic, let out a low chuckle. "Yeah, 'cause nothing bad ever happens in these hills at night." His sarcasm was met with a few weary grins from the others. Holloway signaled for a halt, raising a clenched fist. The men froze, their training kicking in. The sergeant crouched, pressing a hand to the damp earth. A faint vibration, distant but unmistakable. "Movement," he murmured. "East of us. Could be nothing, could be trouble." Reyes exhaled sharply. "Or could be Charlie setting up shop." Reynolds tightened his grip on his rifle. "Stay sharp. We move slow, stay low, eyes open." The team advanced, the jungle pressing in around them like a living thing. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call set nerves on edge. Holloway's mind raced. This wasn't just about spotting enemy troops, it was about survival. One wrong step, one misplaced sound, and the highlands would swallow them whole. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows through the trees, Bravo team crept deeper into the unknown. The mission had only just begun, but the weight of the jungle, the heat, and the unseen eyes watching from the darkness already bore down on them. And somewhere out there, the enemy waited. The makeshift barracks were little more than a cluster of tents huddled beneath the jungle's edge, their canvas walls offering scant relief from the oppressive humidity. Night had fallen, and with it came the chorus of insects and the occasional distant howl of something unseen. The men of Bravo team sat in a loose circle, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of a single lantern. Private Danny Reyes leaned back on his cot, tossing a worn deck of cards onto the crate between them. "Another round?" he asked, flashing a grin. "I'll take your rations, your smokes. Hell, I'll even take your dignity if you're dumb enough to bet it." Corporal Tom Doc Harris snorted, shuffling the deck with practiced ease. "Keep talking, Reyes. Last time you tried bluffing, I owned your ass for a week." Lieutenant Reynolds sat at the edge of the group, polishing his sidearm with a rag. The rhythmic motion betrayed his tension. "Save the gambling for R&R, he muttered. "We've got patrol at first light." Reyes rolled his eyes, but didn't argue. Instead, he nudged Corporal Tom Riggs, who had been unusually quiet. "Hey, Riggs, you in or what? Or are you too busy staring at shadows?" Riggs didn't respond at first. His gaze was fixed on the tent flap, as if expecting something or someone to step through. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "You hear about Echo Platoon?" The air in the tent shifted. Reyes' grin faltered. "What about them?" Riggs exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "Went missing 2 days ago. Whole damn unit vanished. No distress call, no signs of a firefight. Just gone." A beat of silence. Then Reyes scoffed. "Command would have said something." "Would they?" Riggs countered, his eyes darting to Reynolds. "You think they'd tell us if another team got wiped out in these hills?" Harris set the cards down, his usual sarcasm absent. "Where'd you hear this?" "Supply runner. Said their last check-in was clean, then nothing. No bodies, no gear left behind, like they walked off the damn map." Reynolds stopped polishing his gun. "That's enough," he said, voice firm. "Rumors don't help anyone. Echo could have been rerouted, comms could have gone down, happens all the time." But Holloway, who had been listening from the shadows near the tent entrance, didn't look convinced. He stepped forward, the lantern light carving deep lines into his face. "Riggs is right about one thing. This place eats people. Stay sharp, stay together, and if you see something out there that doesn't feel right," he let the words hang. Reyes shifted uncomfortably. Yeah. Trust your instincts. Blah, blah. Look, if Charlie's got some new trick, we'll handle it. We always do. Holloway's expression didn't change. "Just don't get cocky, Reyes. Cocky gets you dead." Outside, the jungle murmured a rustle of leaves, the distant snap of a branch. The men exchanged glances, the weight of Riggs's words settling over them like a shroud. Somewhere beyond the safety of the lantern's glow, the highlands waited, and tonight, the darkness felt a little heavier. The pre-dawn mist clung to the jungle like a ghost, curling around the trunks of ancient trees and swallowing the sound of Bravo Team's footsteps. Sergeant Holloway led the way, his rifle slung low, eyes scanning the shifting gray veil ahead. Behind him, the men moved in single file, their breaths shallow, their senses sharp. Private Eddie Lawson, the youngest and newest addition to the team, brought up the rear. His grip on his rifle was white-knuckled, his pulse hammering in his throat. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call sent his nerves jangling. Lieutenant Reynolds paused, holding up a fist. The team halted, their boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. Holloway crouched, pressing a finger to his lips. For a long moment, there was nothing but the whisper of the wind through the trees. Then, a branch snapped. Lawson's head whipped toward the sound, his breath catching. Through the mist, just beyond the edge of visibility, something moved. A shadow? A figure? He blinked, straining his eyes. There, a tall, gaunt shape, standing unnaturally still between the trees. Then another, and another. "Contact," Lawson hissed, raising his rifle. 3 o'clock movement in the tree line. The team pivoted as one, weapons trained on the mist. But as the seconds stretched, nothing emerged. The jungle remained eerily silent. Reyes exhaled sharply. "Lawson." "I saw them," Lawson insisted, his voice tight. "Figures, just standing there." Doc Harris lowered his rifle slightly, frowning. Holloway didn't relax. His gaze remained fixed on the spot Lawson had indicated. "You sure?" Lawson swallowed. "Positive." Reynolds exchanged a glance with Holloway, then signaled for the team to advance. "Stay sharp. Lawson, keep your eyes open, but don't jump at shadows." They moved forward, the mist parting reluctantly before them. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. No birds called, no insects chirped. Even the oppressive humidity felt thinner, as if the air itself had been drained of life. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the mist thinned. The trees opened into a small clearing, the ground littered with fallen leaves and twisted roots. And in the center, nothing. No footprints, no signs of passage, just the quiet, watchful jungle. Reyes kicked at the dirt, shaking his head. Goddamn rookies seeing ghosts. Lawson didn't respond. His skin prickled. He could still feel eyes on him, boring into his back. Holloway checked his compass, then gestured northeast. "We push on. Ridge is another click ahead. Keep your mouths shut and your ears open." As the team moved out, Lawson cast one last glance over his shoulder. The mist had thickened again, swallowing the clearing behind them, and for a heartbeat he could have sworn something watched him from the trees. Something with too many eyes. Nightfall brought an unnatural stillness. The jungle, usually alive with the hum of insects and the rustle of unseen creatures, had gone eerily quiet. Bravo team had set up a perimeter watch, 2-hour rotations, weapons loaded, eyes straining against the dark. Private Eddie Lawson sat on a moss-covered log, his rifle resting across his knees. His shift had just begun, but the oppressive silence gnawed at his nerves. He glanced at Corporal Riggs, who stood a few feet away, scanning the tree line with narrowed eyes. "You feel that?" Lawson whispered. Riggs didn't look at him. Feel what? Like the air's too thick, like something's pressing down on us. Riggs exhaled sharply. "It's called humidity, kid. Welcome to the jungle." But Lawson wasn't convinced. He rubbed his arms, the hair standing on end. Then he saw it, a tendril of mist curling between the trees. Not the usual evening haze, but something denser, darker. It slithered along the ground like a living thing, creeping toward their camp. "Riggs," Lawson hissed, "look." The corporal turned, his breath catching as the fog thickened before their eyes. Within seconds, it swallowed the nearest trees, rising in an opaque wall. Sergeant Holloway's voice cut through the silence from behind them. "Eyes up." He stepped forward, his rifle raised. The fog had already reached the edge of their camp, tendrils licking at their boots. "This isn't natural." Lieutenant Reynolds emerged from his tent, his face tight. "Weather report said clear skies." Doc Harris joined them, his usual sarcasm absent. "Yeah, well, the weather report also said we'd be home by." The fog rolled in faster now, swallowing the camp whole. Within moments, visibility dropped to mere feet. The lanterns flickered, their light diffusing into a dull glow that barely pierced the murk. Holloway's voice was a low growl. "Reyes, Harris, check the perimeter. Riggs, Lawson, stay sharp. If this is Charlie using smoke, they'll hit us while we're blind." Reyes hesitated, his fingers flexing around his rifle. "Sarge, you ever seen fog move like this?" Holloway didn't answer. He didn't need to. The team fanned out, their silhouettes ghostly in the thickening mist. Lawson's pulse hammered in his ears. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every whisper of wind sounded like footsteps. Then, a sound. Not the jungle, not the wind. A voice. Muffled, distant, but unmistakably human. Lawson froze. "Did you hear that?" Riggs turned, his rifle raised. "Hear what?" The voice came again, closer this time. A whisper, just on the edge of comprehension. "Eddie." Lawson's blood turned to ice. That voice, he knew it. It was his brother's. His brother, who had died in Hue 2 years ago. Riggs grabbed his arm. "Lawson, you okay?" Lawson wrenched free, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "You didn't hear that?" "Hear what?" The fog swirled around them, thick and suffocating. Somewhere in the murk something moved. A shape tall, hunched, gliding just beyond sight. Holloway's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Fall back to camp, now." But the fog had other plans. And in the heart of it, something waited. The fog clung to them like a second skin, damp and suffocating. Lawson's breath came in shallow gasps as he backed toward the center of camp, his rifle trembling in his grip. The voice, his brother's voice, had faded, but the echo of it still rang in his skull. Reyes and Harris emerged from the mist, their faces pale. "Perimeter's clear," Reyes muttered, though his eyes darted nervously to the shifting walls of fog. No sign of Charlie, no sign of anything. Lieutenant Reynolds wiped sweat from his brow, his voice tight. Then where the hell is that voice coming from? As if in answer, another sound cut through the silence, a burst of static from Reyes' radio. The men flinched as the device crackled to life, spitting out garbled syllables before resolving into a faint, desperate transmission. "They're not here." The voice was American, hollow. Reyes fumbled with the radio, adjusting the frequency. "This is Bravo Team. Identify yourself." More static. Then, a whisper, barely audible. "Can't see them, but they're watching." Doc Harris grabbed Reyes's wrist, his grip tight. "Turn it off." Reyes hesitated, then clicked the radio off. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Holloway's jaw tightened. "We're not alone out here." Lawson swallowed hard. "Sarge, that voice, it sounded like..." A twig snapped. The team spun as one, weapons raised. The fog swirled, parting just enough to reveal a figure standing at the edge of camp. Tall, lean, dressed in tattered fatigues. Reyes' finger hovered over the trigger. "Identify yourself!" The figure didn't move. Didn't speak. Then, as the fog shifted again, they saw its face. Or rather, the absence of one. Where features should have been, there was only smooth, unbroken skin. Lawson's breath caught in his throat. "Jesus Christ!" The figure raised a hand, slow, deliberate, and pointed past them, deeper into the jungle. Then it stepped back, vanishing into the mist. For a heartbeat, no one moved, no one breathed. Then Holloway broke the silence, his voice low and steady. "Weapons hot. We move. Now." Reynolds shook his head. "Move where?" "That thing." "Wasn't Charlie," Holloway finished, "and it wasn't natural. But standing here, that's a death sentence." The team fell into formation, backs pressed together, rifles sweeping the fog. With each step, the jungle seemed to warp around them, trees twisting into grotesque shapes, shadows stretching too long. Then, faint but unmistakable, the voices returned. Dozens of them, whispering, calling their names. Lawson clenched his teeth, forcing himself to keep moving. His brother's voice threaded through the others, pleading, desperate. "Eddie, why didn't you save me?" He shut his eyes for a second, then opened them, and froze. The fog had thinned just ahead, and in the clearing beyond stood rows of figures. All faceless, all waiting. Reyes sucked in a sharp breath. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." Holloway didn't hesitate. "Run!" The team broke into a sprint, crashing through the underbrush as the fog surged behind them, alive with whispers. The faceless things didn't chase. They didn't need to. The jungle itself seemed to shift, guiding them, herding them deeper into the unknown. And as the last of the light faded, Bravo Team realized the terrible truth. They weren't hunters anymore. They were prey. The jungle had swallowed them whole. Bravo Team stumbled into a shallow ravine, their boots slipping on damp moss and tangled roots. The fog had finally thinned, but the oppressive weight of the jungle remained, pressing down on them like a living thing. Holloway signaled for a halt, his chest heaving as he scanned their surroundings. Reyes collapsed against a tree, wiping sweat from his face. Doc Harris crouched, checking his rifle with shaky hands. "You mean the faceless ghost soldiers? Or the fog that shouldn't exist?" "Take your pick." Lieutenant Reynolds leaned heavily on his knees, his breath ragged. "We need to regroup, get our bearings." Holloway nodded, pulling out his compass. The needle spun lazily before settling, then twitched again, as if unsure of its own direction. He cursed under his breath. "Compass is shot. Either we're near something magnetic, or this place doesn't play by the rules," Riggs finished darkly. Lawson, still pale from the whispers in the fog, knelt beside a fallen log. His fingers brushed against something half buried in the damp earth. "Hey, Sarge." He dug at the dirt, pulling free a crumpled sheet of paper. The others gathered as Lawson smoothed it out. A map, old, water-stained, but still legible. Coordinates were scrawled in the margins, along with hasty notes in faded ink. Reynolds frowned. "That's not one of ours." Riggs stiffened. His fingers traced the handwriting, his breath catching. "No, it's not." His voice was barely above a whisper. "This is Corporal Haskins' writing. Echo Platoon." A chill settled over the group. Reyes exhaled sharply. "The missing unit?" Riggs nodded, his jaw tight. "Haskins was my bunkmate in basic. I'd know his handwriting anywhere." Holloway studied the map, his brow furrowed. The coordinates didn't match any known landmarks in the region. "This doesn't make sense. These markings, they're pointing to a grid that doesn't exist." Harris leaned in. "Or shouldn't exist." Lawson's fingers trembled as he held the map. "You think Echo found something out here? Something that got them taken?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Reyes shook his head. "No way. This is some kind of setup. Charlie leaves a fake map to mess with us. We follow it right into an ambush." Holloway's gaze flicked to the jungle around them. Too quiet, too still. Maybe, but if this is from Echo, it might be the only clue we've got. Reynolds hesitated, then straightened. "We can't stay here. If we follow these coordinates, we might find answers, or at least a way out." Riggs' grip tightened on his rifle. "Or we might find whatever took Echo." A long silence. Then Holloway folded the map carefully, tucking it into his vest. "We move. Stay sharp. And if anything feels off, we bail." The team nodded, their faces grim. As they pushed deeper into the jungle, the weight of the unknown settled over them. The faceless figures, the whispers, the missing platoon. And now, a map leading to nowhere. Somewhere ahead, the jungle waited. And whatever lurked within it knew they were coming. The radio crackled to life in Holloway's hands, the static cutting through the humid air like a knife. Behind him, Bravo team stood in tense silence, their faces streaked with dirt and exhaustion. The jungle pressed in around them, its oppressive weight a constant reminder of the horrors they'd just escaped. Holloway adjusted the frequency, his voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through him. "Bravo team to command, do you copy? Over." A beat of silence. Then, "This is command. Go ahead, Bravo." The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, unfazed. Holloway exhaled sharply, his grip tightening on the handset. "We've encountered hostile entities in the jungle. Non-combatants. Repeat, non-combatants. Faceless figures, possible psychological or supernatural engagement. Request immediate extraction and backup. Over." Another pause. Too long. "Bravo, clarify your last. Did you engage with enemy forces? Over." Holloway's jaw clenched. "Negative. Not VC, not human. We have reason to believe Echo Platoon may have encountered the same threat before their disappearance. Requesting." "Sergeant, stand down." The officer's voice hardened. "You're reporting jungle fatigue. Recommend you regroup, recalibrate, and proceed with mission parameters. No missing platoons are registered in your sector. Over." The words hit Holloway like a punch to the gut. He glanced back at Riggs, whose face had gone pale. "Command," Holloway pressed, "we have evidence. A map confirmed to belong to Echo's Corporal Haskins. Coordinates leading to..." "Sergeant Holloway." The officer's tone turned icy. "There is no Echo Platoon. Records show no missing men in your AO. You are either misinformed or experiencing stress-induced paranoia. Complete your mission and return to base. Command out." The line went dead. For a long moment, no one spoke. The jungle's chorus of insects and distant bird calls filled the void, mocking in its normalcy. Reyes was the first to break the silence, his voice dripping with disbelief. Did they just gaslight us? Doc Harris let out a humorless laugh, rubbing his temples. Oh, sure. Jungle nerves. Because hallucinations are totally standard issue. Lieutenant Reynolds paced, his boots kicking up damp leaves. This doesn't make sense. Even if Command's covering something up, why deny Echo's existence outright? Reek stepped forward, his hand shaking. Because they know. His voice was low, urgent. I've seen the logs. I've talked to the supply runners. Echo was real. They vanished. And Command's scrubbing them from the record. Lawson swallowed hard. So what do we do? All eyes turned to Holloway. The sergeant stared at the silent radio, his mind racing. The faceless figures, the whispers, the map leading to nowhere. And now, Command's refusal to acknowledge any of it. He made his decision. We don't go back. Holloway's voice was steel. Not yet. We follow Echo's trail, find out what happened to them, and what's really out here. Reyes scoffed, but there was no real bite behind it. Oh great, so instead of extraction, we're volunteering for the horror show. Holloway didn't smile. You got a better idea? No one did. Reynolds exhaled sharply, then nodded. Then we move. But if Command's lying about Echo, they're lying about something else, and I want to know what. The team fell into formation, weapons ready, eyes scanning the shifting shadows of the jungle. Ahead, the path loomed dark, uncertain, and heavy with secrets. And as they stepped forward, the trees seemed to lean in closer, whispering a warning only they could hear. The jungle had grown restless. Bravo team moved cautiously through the undergrowth, the oppressive weight of the previous night's horrors still clinging to them like the dampness in the air. Holloway led the way, his rifle barrel tracing the path ahead, every muscle coiled tight. The map from Echo Platoon was tucked securely in his vest, its cryptic markings burning against his chest like a brand. Private Eddie Lawson kept to the middle of the formation, his grip on his rifle slick with sweat. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard his brother's voice in the fog, saw the faceless figures watching from the trees. Then the mist returned. It slithered between the trunks, curling around their ankles like tendrils of smoke. Not as thick as the night before, but enough to blur the edges of the world. Lawson's breath hitched. Sarge, he whispered. Holloway raised a fist, halting the team. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the shifting gray veil. Stay sharp. Reyes shifted beside Lawson, his usual bravado muted. You seeing this? Lawson nodded. The fog pulsed, as if breathing, and then moved. Shadows flickered just beyond the mist's reach. Tall, indistinct shapes, gliding between the trees. Lawson's pulse spiked. There, 2 o'clock. The team pivoted, weapons raised. The figures didn't flee. They stood motionless, silhouettes blurred by the fog. Reyes sucked in a sharp breath. Do you see what they're wearing? Lawson squinted. The shapes weren't clad in black pajamas or the greens of the Viet Cong. Their uniforms were faded, tattered, but unmistakable. U.S. Army issue. Outdated. World War II era. Doc Harris lowered his rifle slightly, his voice hollow. That's not possible. Lieutenant Reynolds stepped forward, his jaw tight. Identify yourselves. No response. The figures remained still, their faces obscured by the mist. Then, as one, they turned slow, deliberate, and vanished into the jungle. Briggs exhaled sharply. We need to follow them. Holloway grabbed his arm. No, we don't know what they are. What they could be. They're not Echo. Holloway's voice was a low growl. You think a platoon from the 40S just wandered into this jungle and decided to play ghost? Reyes shook his head, his fingers flexing around his rifle. Then what are they? The answer came not from Holloway but from the jungle itself. A whisper carried on the wind. Lost. The voice was ragged, broken, and it came from everywhere at once. Lawson's blood turned to ice. Did you? Holloway didn't let him finish. Move, now. The team didn't argue. They broke into a jog, putting distance between themselves and the fog, the figures, the voice. But as they ran, Lawson couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on his back. And when he dared to glance over his shoulder, he saw them. The figures, standing at the edge of the mist, watching. Wait. One raised a hand, fingers splayed as if in warning. Then the jungle swallowed them whole. The jungle had fallen unnaturally silent again. Bravo team crouched in a tight circle, their backs pressed together, rifles scanning the dense foliage. The mist had dissipated, but the air still hummed with tension, thick and electric, like the moment before a storm. Holloway adjusted the radio's frequency, his knuckles white around the handset. Static hissed through the speaker, a monotonous drone that set their teeth on edge. Anything? Reynolds muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. Holloway shook his head. Dead air. Then, a burst of noise, a voice, fractured and distant, cutting through the static like a knife. This is Echo 3. We're lost in the fog. They took us. The transmission dissolved into garbled static before surging back. The voice now frantic, barely human. Can't see them, but they're everywhere. Riggs lunged forward, grabbing the radio. Echo 3, this is Bravo team. What's your location? Repeat, what's your... A screech of feedback tore through the speaker, sharp enough to make them flinch. Then, silence. The jungle held its breath. Holloway ripped the radio from Riggs' hands, adjusting the dials with rough, urgent twists. Echo 3, respond. Do you copy? Nothing. Reyes exhaled sharply. That was Echo. Doc Harris ran a hand through his hair, his usual sarcasm absent. And now they're gone. Again. Lawson's fingers trembled against his rifle. They said, they took us. Who the hell is they? Renal turned to Holloway, his face tight. We need to call this in. Command can't ignore a live transmission. Holloway's jaw clenched. He knew it was futile. Command had already denied Echo's existence, but he lifted the radio anyway. Bravo team to command. Priority alert. We've intercepted a distress call from Echo Platoon. Repeat, we have confirmation Echo is, or was, in this sector. Request immediate support. Over. The static stretched. Then, Bravo team, this is command. The officer's voice was clipped. Negative on Echo contact. You are experiencing radio interference or enemy deception. Proceed with mission. Command out. The line went dead. Reyes kicked a rock, sending it skittering into the underbrush. Rick's hands curled into fists. They're lying. That transmission was real. Echo's out here, or what's left of them. Holloway stared at the silent radio, his mind racing. The faceless figures, the whispers, the ghostly soldiers in outdated uniforms. And now Echo's broken plea for help. None of it made sense, but none of it was coincidence. He made a decision. We're not waiting for command. Holloway's voice was low, final. We tracked that transmission's origin. Find Echo ourselves. Reynolds hesitated. That's a direct violation of orders. And staying put is a death sentence. Holloway met each of their eyes in turn. You heard that voice. You know what's out here. I'm not leaving men behind, not even if command pretends they don't exist." A beat of silence. Then, one by one, the team nodded. Lawson swallowed hard. "Which way?" Holloway pulled out Echo's map, tracing the coordinates with a grim focus. "Northwest. Toward the river. If Echo's signal came from anywhere, it's there." The jungle seemed to pulse around them, the trees leaning in as if listening. Somewhere in the green gloom, something watched. And as Bravo team moved out, the radio crackled once more, a final, broken whisper before dying for good. "Don't let them take you too." The river loomed ahead, its dark waters cutting through the jungle like a scar. Bravo team moved cautiously along its banks, their boots sinking into the damp earth with each step. The air smelled of wet stone and decay, the humidity clinging to their skin like a second layer of grime. Holloway signaled for a halt, his eyes narrowing at a break in the foliage, a narrow path half hidden by tangled vines. "There," he murmured. "That's where the transmission originated." Reyes wiped sweat from his brow, squinting at the overgrowth. "You sure? Looks like a one-way ticket to Snakebite City." Doc Harris adjusted his pack, his voice uncharacteristically grim. "Or worse." The team advanced, pushing through the dense vegetation. The jungle seemed to resist them, branches snagging at their uniforms, roots twisting underfoot. Then, abruptly, the foliage gave way to a clearing, and there, nestled into the hillside like a wound, was the bunker. It was old, older than the war. Its concrete walls were cracked and weathered, the steel door rusted shut. A faded insignia was barely visible beneath layers of grime. U.S. Army, 1970. Lawson's breath caught. "That's not possible. We didn't even have men stationed here in 70. Reynolds stepped forward, running a hand along the bunker's pockmarked surface. "Then who the hell built it?" Holloway didn't answer. He grabbed the door's handle, straining against years of corrosion. With a final heave, the hinges screamed in protest and the bunker yawned open, exhaling a breath of stale metallic air. The team flicked on their flashlights, the beams cutting through the darkness. Inside, the bunker was a time capsule. Crates of supplies covered in dust. A radio set, its wires frayed and dead. And in the corner, a cot with a journal lying atop it, its pages yellowed with age. Riggs was the first to reach it. He flipped it open, his fingers trembling as he scanned the entries. The others crowded around. The handwriting was frantic, the ink smeared in places as if by sweat or tears. June 14, 1970. Men are vanishing, not captured, not dead, just gone. 1 minute they're here, the next, poof, like the fog swallowed them whole. Command says we're imagining things, but we're not. We saw them. The figures. The ones with no faces. June 17, 1970. They're watching us. Every night the fog rolls in and we hear them whispering our names. Jenkins swore it was his mother's voice. He ran into the trees after it. We never found him. June 21, 1970. They're not VC. They're not even human. They're something else. Something that's been here long before us, and they're hungry. The final entry was a single line, the letters shaking as if written in terror. Don't let the fog take you. A chill settled over the group. Reyes exhaled sharply. Well, that's not terrifying at all. Holloway took the journal, flipping through the remaining pages, but they were blank. Whatever had happened to the writer, he hadn't lived to finish his story. Harris crouched by the radio, brushing dust from its dials. This thing's vintage, but it's the same model Echo would have had. If they were here, they could have used it. Reynolds frowned. But this bunker's from 1970. Echo disappeared last week. How? A sound cut him off. A whisper. Not from the journal, not from the radio. From outside. The team froze. The jungle had gone silent again, the way it always did before the fog came. Lawson's grip tightened on his rifle. "You hear that?" No one answered. They didn't need to. The voice came again, clearer this time, a woman's voice, soft and pleading. "Hey, Mark, come home." Reynolds went pale. His mother's name was Sarah, and she'd passed away 3 years ago? Holloway snapped the journal shut. "We're leaving, now." But as they turned toward the door, the first tendrils of fog slithered across the threshold, thick and hungry. And somewhere in its depths, something moved. Something with too many eyes. The bunker door groaned shut behind them, sealing Bravo team inside, with the creeping fog and the whispers that slithered through its tendrils. Holloway's flashlight beam cut through the murk, revealing the journal still clutched in his hand, its pages a testament to horrors that defied logic. Riggs moved to the rusted radio, his fingers tracing the dials. "This thing's got to be the source of the transmission. But how? It's been dead for years." Doc Harris crouched beside him, examining the frayed wires. "Unless someone wanted us to hear it. Lure us here." Outside, the whispering grew louder. "Tom, why did you leave me behind?" Riggs flinched. The voice was unmistakable. His sister, Lila, who had died in a car crash back in '65. His hands shook as he yanked open the radio's casing, revealing a mess of corroded components. Then he froze. "Son of a bitch." Holloway stepped closer. "What is it?" Riggs held up a small, blackened device wired into the radio's guts. "This isn't standard issue, it's a recorder. Someone planted this to play that distress call." Reyes cursed under his breath. So Echo's transmission was a setup? But who the hell? A thud against the bunker door cut him off. The metal shuddered, dust raining from the ceiling. Lawson backed away, rifle raised. "They're here." Holloway shoved the journal into his vest and motioned to a narrow ventilation shaft in the rear wall. "Move, now." One by one they squeezed into the tight passage, the rusted metal groaning under their weight. The shaft emptied into a drainage tunnel, its floor slick with stagnant water. The air reeked of mildew and something fouler, copper and rot. Reynolds gagged. "What is that?" Doc Harris' flashlight beam swept the tunnel, revealing streaks of dark residue along the walls. Blood. Old. But not old enough. The tunnel curved, then opened into another chamber. This one lined with filing cabinets, their drawers half open, spilling yellow documents onto the floor. A desk sat in the center, its surface covered in maps and blacked-out reports. Riggs moved to the nearest cabinet, flipping through the files. His breath hitched. These are records. Military. Classified. He pulled one free, holding it up. Operation Pale Horse, 1970. Holloway took the file, skimming the contents. His face darkened. They knew. Reyes leaned in. Knew what? That this place wasn't just jungle. That something was here before us. Holloway's voice was gravel. And they sent men in anyway. A cold realization settled over the group. Command hadn't just ignored Echo's disappearance. They'd expected it. Doc Harris exhaled sharply. "We're not hunting ghosts. We're walking into a goddamn cover-up." Another thud echoed through the tunnel, closer this time. The fog was advancing. Holloway grabbed a handful of files, stuffing them into his pack. "We take what we can. Get to the river. If Command's hiding this, we need proof." As they turned to leave, Lawson's flashlight caught something on the desk. A faded photograph. A group of soldiers posed stiffly, their faces blurred, except one. A young private, his eyes wide with terror. And behind him, just visible in the shadows, a tall, gaunt figure, faceless. Watching, Riggs' hand shot out, snatching the photo. We're not the first, and if we don't move, we won't be the last. The whispers surged, the fog curling around the tunnel's entrance. Bravo Team ran. The drainage tunnel spat them out at the river's edge, the dark water churning against the rocks. Holloway crouched behind a gnarled root, his breath ragged as he scanned the jungle behind them. The fog hadn't followed, not yet, but the whispers still slithered through the trees, just beyond hearing. Riggs dumped the stolen files onto the damp ground, his hand shaking as he flipped through them. Reyes knelt beside him, his usual smirk replaced by a grimace. "Tell me you found something useful in all this black ink." Doc Harris snatched a page, holding it up to the fading light. "This one's less redacted than the others. Look, Project Echo." Holloway's head snapped up. "Echo? Like the platoon?" Harris's jaw tightened as he read. "Not like the platoon. Named after it. This operation was active in '70. They sent teams in to study something." He squinted at the smudged text. "Subjects exhibit auditory and visual hallucinations consistent with prior encounters. Recommend immediate rest. Is blacked out." Lawson's stomach twisted. They knew about the voices, the faceless things. They knew. Reynolds grabbed another document, his face paling. "This one's a casualty report. Dozens of names, all listed as MIA. No recovery attempts, no investigations, just gone." Riggs exhaled sharply, tapping a faded stamp at the bottom of the page. "See that? Eyes only Director Strickland. This goes way above command. This is Pentagon level buried." A branch snapped in the undergrowth. The team froze, rifle snapping up. The jungle held its breath. Nothing moved. Holloway lowered his weapon, but his eyes stayed locked on the trees. "We can't stay here. If command's covering this up, they'll send someone to clean up loose ends." Reyes scoffed. "You mean us?" Holloway didn't deny it. He stuffed the files back into his pack, his voice low. "River's our best shot. Follow it downstream, find a village, get word out." Doc Harris hesitated. "And if the fog comes back?" A beat of silence. Then Riggs stood, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Then we run faster." The team moved out, keeping to the riverbank, where the undergrowth was thinner. The water's murmur masked their footsteps, but every shadow seemed to twitch at the edge of their vision. Then Lawson saw it, a glint of metal half buried in the mud. He crouched, brushing away the dirt. A dog tag. "Haskins, C Echo Platoon." His blood ran cold. "Riggs?" The corporal turned, his face crumbling as he took the tag. Haskins was here. His thumb rubbed the engraved letters, his voice hollow. "They took him too." A gust of wind rustled the leaves overhead, carrying with it the faintest whisper. "They're coming." Holloway's head snapped up. "Move, now!" The jungle erupted behind them. Not gunfire, not shouts. Something worse. The fog. It surged from the trees like a living thing, tendrils snaking across the ground, swallowing the light. And within it, shape, tall, gaunt, faceless. Reyes didn't wait. He bolted, the others close behind. The riverbank narrowed, forcing them single file as the fog licked at their heels. Then the whispers became voices. "Danny, you promised you'd come home." Reyes stumbled, his breath hitching. His mother's voice. From the last letter she'd sent. The one he'd never answered. Holloway grabbed his arm, yanking him forward. "Don't listen, it's not real." But the fog was faster. It coiled around Lawson's ankle, icy fingers dragging him down. He screamed, thrashing as the voices swarmed. "Eddie, you left me to die." His brother's face flashed in the mist, eyes wide, mouth bleeding. A gunshot cracked the air. The fog recoiled. Holloway stood, smoking barrel-raised, his face a mask of fury. "Run!" They ran. The river curved ahead, the current swift and unforgiving. No boats. No escape. Only one choice. Reynolds didn't hesitate. He jumped. The others followed, plunging into the icy water as the fog howled behind them. The current dragged them under, the world reduced to churning black and the distant fading screams of things that were never human. And as Bravo team fought for the surface, one truth burned brighter than fear. Command had sent them here to die, but they weren't dead yet. The river spat them onto the opposite bank, coughing and gasping. Holloway dragged himself onto the rocks, his muscles burning, the weight of his soaked gear threatening to pull him under again. One by one, the others followed Reyes, retching up river water, Lawson trembling from cold and shock, Doc Harris checking Riggs' pulse with fingers that shook only slightly. Reynolds collapsed onto his back, staring at the canopy. "We can't keep doing this." Holloway didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the far shore, where the fog still churned, a living wall between them and whatever had pursued them. But it didn't cross the water, couldn't cross. Riggs sat up, rubbing his throat. "The files?" Holloway patted his pack, sodden but intact. "Still here." Doc Harris wrung out his sleeve, nodding downstream. "We follow the river east. There's a village marked on Echo's map about 6 clicks out. If we're lucky, they've got a radio, or at least a boat." Lawson's hands wouldn't stop shaking. "And if we're not lucky?" No one answered. They moved in silence, their boots squelching with every step. The jungle here was different, older. The trees gnarled and twisted into shapes that made the eyes slide away. The air smelled of wet stone and something metallic like old blood. Then Reyes froze. "Sarge." Holloway followed his gaze. The mud ahead was churned, fresh boot prints pressed deep into the earth. Military issue. Recent. Riggs crouched, tracing the tread. "Not ours." Harris exhaled sharply. "Echo?" Holloway's gut said no. The prints were too orderly, too purposeful. "A patrol." He signaled for silence, motioning the team into cover. They melted into the undergrowth, rifles up, breaths held. The jungle waited. Then voices. Not whispers, not ghosts. Human. "Extraction point is compromised. Repeat, compromised. Fall back 2. The radio static swallowed the rest. Holloway peered through the leaves. 3 figures in fatigues moved cautiously along the riverbank, their uniforms clean, their gear pristine. Not Echo. Not even Bravo's unit. "New mate." Reynolds' breath hitched. "That's Delta's insignia. They're from Firebase Tango." Doc Harris cursed under his breath. "Command sent another team in after us?" Riggs's fingers tightened around his rifle. "Or sent them to clean up their mess." Holloway made the call. He stepped into view, hands raised. "Delta team, hold fire, friendly." The soldiers spun, rifles snapping up. A heartbeat of tension, then recognition flickered in the squad leader's eyes. "Holloway?" Sergeant Vince Carter, a face from another life. Holloway lowered his hands. "What the hell are you doing here, Carter?" Carter didn't relax. His men didn't either. "Search and recover. Command lost contact with Echo Platoon. Then you went dark." His gaze flicked to the ragged state of Bravo team. "Looks like we found you." Reyes barked a laugh. "Oh, that's rich. Command just told us Echo never existed." Carter's jaw tightened. We're under strict orders to retrieve any personnel and return to base. No questions. Holloway stepped closer. And if we refuse? A pause. Too long. Carter's radio crackled. Delta Leader, status report over. Bravo team exchanged glances. They all knew that voice. Director Strickland. Holloway's hand inched toward his sidearm. You're not here to rescue us. Carter's expression hardened. Orders are orders. The jungle exploded. Not gunfire. Not yet. The fog. It surged from the trees like a living thing, tendrils snaking across the ground, swallowing the light. Delta team recoiled, their discipline cracking. Vince, you left us behind. Carter paled. The voice was his brother's KIA in Laos. Holloway didn't hesitate. Run, now. Bravo team bolted, crashing through the undergrowth as Delta team's shouts turned to screams behind them. The fog swallowed the sound, the jungle thrashing as if alive. Lawson risked a glance back and wished he hadn't. The footprints in the mud had multiplied. Hundreds of them, fresh and leading straight for them. The jungle became a blur of green and gray as Bravo team sprinted through the undergrowth, the fog licking at their heels. The whispers surged around them, a chorus of voices calling out names, dredging up memories long buried. Jack, you promised you'd bring him home. Holloway gritted his teeth, forcing himself not to react. That voice his father's, from the last letter he'd sent before the cancer took him. Reyes wasn't as strong. He faltered, his breath hitching as a woman's voice, soft, melodic, cooed through the mist. Danny, you were supposed to protect me. His sister, the one he couldn't save. Lawson broke first. With a strangled cry, he whirled, firing his rifle blindly into the fog. The muzzle flash lit up the writhing mist for a split second, revealing shapes, tall, emaciated, their featureless faces turned toward him. They're right there, he screamed, emptying the magazine. Do you see them? Do you? Doc Harris tackled him, knocking the rifle from his hands. Lawson, snap out of it. But Lawson wasn't listening. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated, sweat pouring down his face. They're touching me. Oh God, their hands. He clawed at his arms, his neck, as if something unseen were gripping him. Riggs grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. It's not real. Whatever you're hearing, whatever you're feeling, it's not real. The fog thickened, the voices rising to a crescendo. Tom, why'd you let me drown? Riggs flinched. His hands slipped from Lawson's shoulders. Holloway saw the team unraveling. He stepped between them and the fog, his voice cutting through the chaos. We move, now. Eyes forward. Don't listen. Don't stop. He grabbed Lawson by the vest, dragging him forward. The private stumbled, his breath ragged, but he ran. The jungle shifted around them, branches snagging at their clothes like skeletal fingers. The fog clung to their skin, damp and suffocating, carrying with it the scent of rotting earth and something sweet, like decay masked with perfume. Then, ahead, a break in the trees, a clearing, and in the center, a crumbling stone structure, overgrown with vines. Reyes skidded to a halt. What the hell is that? It looked ancient, older than the bunker, older than the war. Carvings lined its moss-covered walls, symbols that made Holloway's eyes ache just to look at. Doc Harris swallowed hard. We don't want to go in there. The fog pressed in from behind, the whispers now deafening. Holloway made the call, inside, now. The team rushed through the arched entrance, the temperature dropping instantly. The air was stale, thick with the weight of centuries. Holloway turned, expecting the fog to follow, but it stopped at the threshold, swirling angrily just beyond the stone. As if barred by something unseen, Reynolds exhaled sharply. "It can't come in." Lawson sank to his knees, trembling. "But they can." His voice was hollow, broken. Holloway followed his gaze to the far wall. The carvings weren't just symbols. They were names. Hundreds of them, and among them freshly etched. Haskins C. Echo Platoon. Riggs stepped forward, tracing the letters with shaking fingers. "They're not just taking people." His voice was barely a whisper. "They're recording them." Outside, the fog howled. And somewhere deep in the jungle, something answered. The whispers had stopped. Inside the ancient structure, the air was thick with silence. Not the oppressive quiet of the jungle, but something heavier, sacred. Holloway ran his flashlight beam over the walls, the carvings swallowing the light like hungry mouths. Names upon names, some so old the stone had worn smooth, others fresh enough to gleam in the dim glow. Reyes exhaled sharply. "This is a goddamn ledger." Doc Harris traced a cluster of names near the floor French script, dates from the 1800s. Not just ours, everyone who's ever gotten lost here. Lawson hadn't moved from his spot near the entrance. His fingers twitched toward his absent rifle, his eyes darting between the walls and the fog still churning outside. "They're waiting for us." Riggs stepped deeper into the chamber, his boots scuffing something metallic. He bent, retrieving a rusted dog tag. The name was illegible, but the insignia was clear. U.S. Army, 1943. His throat tightened. "How long has this been going on?" Holloway had no answer. His light caught on a recess in the far wall, a narrow passage, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Darker than dark. Reynolds noticed it too. "We're not splitting up." "No," Holloway agreed, "but we're not staying here." The team moved as one, pressing into the tight corridor. The stone whispered against their shoulders, cold and damp. The air smelled of wet earth and something faintly coppery. Then, a sound. Not a whisper, not a voice. A breath. Close. Too close. Holloway froze. His light pierced the blackness ahead, revealing the passage's end. A circular chamber, its walls lined with more names. And in the center, a figure, kneeling, head bowed, dressed in tattered fatigues. Riggs sucked in a sharp breath. Haskins. The figure didn't move. Doc Harris stepped forward, his medic instincts overriding caution. "Hey, soldier, can you hear me?" Still no response. Holloway's grip tightened on his rifle. "Cover me." He approached slowly, the beam of his light trembling slightly. The kneeling man's uniform was unmistakably modern Echo Platoon's insignia, barely visible beneath layers of grime. His hands were clasped in front of him, fingers interlaced as if in prayer. Holloway reached out. "Haskins, we're getting you out of..." The man's head snapped up. No face, just smooth, blank skin where features should have been. Holloway recoiled, his rifle coming up. The figure lunged. Nutted Holloway. Past him, straight for Reyes. Reyes barely had time to shout before the thing was on him, its grip like iron. The team opened fire, bullets chewing into stone as the figure dragged Reyes back toward the wall. Toward the names. Reyes' scream cut off abruptly as his back hit the stone. For a heartbeat, he was suspended there, pinned like a butterfly in a collection. Then the carvings moved, shifting like liquid, swallowing him whole. 1 second he was there, the next, gone. Only his dog tags remained, clattering to the floor. The chamber was silent. Then Lawson whispered. The wall rippled, and from somewhere deep within the stone, Reyes' voice echoed. Guys? Where am I? I can't see. Holloway stepped forward, pressing a hand to the wall. The stone was warm. Alive. Reyes' voice grew frantic. It's dark. It's so dark, and I can hear them, all of them, the names. Doc Harris grabbed Holloway's arm. We have to get him out. Holloway didn't answer. His light swept the chamber, landing on a new carving forming in real time. Letters etching themselves into the stone with terrible precision. Reyes, D. Bravo team. Riggs backed toward the passage, his face ashen. We can't stay here. Outside, the fog howled, and the wall whispered Reyes' name again. Holloway's fingers dug into the stone where Reyes had vanished, as if he could claw through the rock itself. The wall pulsed faintly under his touch, vibrating with a low, dissonant hum. Help me, please. Reyes' voice slithered through the chamber, warped and distant, like a radio transmission fading into static. Doc Harris pressed his ear to the wall, his face pale. He's in there! Lawson backed away, his breath coming in ragged gasps. We can't just leave him. A sharp crack echoed through the chamber. The team spun as one, rifles snapping up, but it wasn't the faceless thing returning. The passage behind them was sealing shut. Stone groaned, grinding against stone as the walls shifted, the narrow corridor collapsing in on itself like a living throat, swallowing. Reynolds grabbed Riggs' arm. Move, now! They barely made it through before the entrance sealed with a final thunderous thud. The chamber shuddered, dust raining from the ceiling. Holloway's flashlight beam darted across the walls. No exit, no way out. And the carvings pulsed brighter, the names glowing faintly in the dark. Riggs kicked the sealed passage, his boots scuffing uselessly against unyielding rock. God damn it! Doc Harris turned to Holloway, his voice tight. We're trapped. Holloway didn't answer. His light lingered on the newest name, Ray, D, then swept lower to the base of the wall. There, half hidden beneath centuries of grime, was a single word carved in jagged, frantic strokes. Listen. The hume in the walls crescendoed, vibrating through their boots. Then, voice, not just Reyes's, hundreds. Men, women, soldiers, all whispering, pleading, screaming from within the stone. Names overlapping, languages blending, a chorus of the lost. Lawson clapped his hands over his ears, sinking to his knees. Make it stop, make it stop! Oh, Daddick! Holloway grabbed him, hauling him up. We don't stop, we don't listen. His voice cut through the noise, sharp as a blade. Find another way out. The team fanned out, pressing hands against the walls, searching for seams, for weaknesses. The stone was slick, almost alive under their fingers. Then Reynolds froze. Holloway. His light illuminated a section where the carvings parted a smooth patch of wall, untouched by names. And in its center, a single, shallow indentation. The shape of a hand. Holloway approached cautiously. The whispers surged around him, the voices rising to a fever pitch. Jack. Don't. His father's voice, closer now. He ignored it, pressed his palm into the depression. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then, the wall shuddered. Stone cracked, fissures spiderwebbing outward as the chamber trembled. The team staggered back as a new passage yawned open, a jagged, unnatural split in the rock, exhaling air so cold it burned their lungs. And beyond it, darkness. Not empty. Wait. Riggs exhaled sharply. That's not an exit. Holloway knew, but the alternative was the tomb at their backs, the whispers growing louder, the walls pressing closer. He made the call. We go. The passage was tight, the stones scraping at their shoulders as they squeezed through. The air grew thinner, the cold biting deeper. Then, light, faint, flickering. A torch set in a rusted sconce. Then another, and another. The passage opened into a cavern so vast their flashlight beams couldn't pierce its edges. The walls were lined with more torches, their flames casting long, dancing shadows. And in the center, a stone slab, an altar, and atop it, a figure, not faceless, not human. Its two long limbs draped over the slab, its skin the color of old bruises. It had no eyes, just deep, hollow sockets that turned toward them as they entered. Its mouth split open in a grin, too wide for any human face. And when it spoke, its voice was the chorus from the walls. Reyes, Haskins, every lost soul, all screaming at once. You took too long. Holloway's rifle was up before the last syllable faded. But the thing was faster. It moved. And then the torches went out. The darkness swallowed them whole. Holloway's finger hovered over the trigger, his breath sharp in his throat. Around him the team tensed, their weapons trained on the last place they'd seen the creature. But there was no sound, no movement, just the oppressive weight of the cavern pressing in. Then a torch flared back to life. Then another. The light spread like a slow wave, revealing the altar. Empty. The thing was gone. Riggs exhaled through his teeth. Where the hell? A whisper slithered through the cavern, too close, too human. They lied to you. Holloway spun. The voice had come from behind them, but there was nothing there, just shadows and flickering torchlight. Doc Harris adjusted his grip on his rifle, his knuckles white. We need to move, now. The team edged toward the cavern's far wall, where another passage loomed narrower than the last, its ceiling jagged and low. Holloway took point, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The air here was stale, thick with the scent of damp stone and something metallic. Then the whispers returned. Not from the walls, from their radios. Static crackled, then resolved into a voice dry, bureaucratic, unmistakably command. Bravo team, this is Director Strickland. You are ordered to cease all unsanctioned operations and return to Firebase Tango immediately. Any deviation will be considered treasonous. Holloway ripped the radio from his belt, his voice a snarl. Strickland, you son of a bitch. You sent us into a graveyard. A pause. Then, Sergeant Holloway, you are clearly suffering from severe psychological distress. Stand down and await extraction. Reynolds grabbed the radio. We found your file, Strickland. Operation Pale Horse. Echo Platoon. How many more have you fed to this place? The line hissed. When Strickland spoke again, his voice was colder. There is no Operation Pale Horse. There is no Echo Platoon. Return to base, or you will be listed as deserters. The transmission cut off. Lawson let out a shaky breath. They're really going to pretend none of this happened. Riggs crouched, rifling through his pack. Not if we have proof. He pulled out the files they'd taken from the bunker, water-stained but intact. These names, these records. They can't bury all of it. Doc Harris nodded toward the passage ahead. Then we get out. Get to a village. Get word back home. Holloway didn't answer. His flashlight had caught something on the cavern floor, a single sheet of paper, partially burned, its edges blackened. He picked it up, turning it over. Most of it was ash. Only 2 words remained, scrawled in frantic handwriting. Echo Lives. Reyes' voice echoed in his memory. Guys, where am I? Holloway folded the paper, tucking it into his vest beside the journal. "We're not leaving without Reyes." The team exchanged glances. Then Riggs stepped forward, his voice low. "Then we find whatever took him, and we burn it to the ground." The passage ahead beckoned, dark and uncertain. Somewhere beyond it, the creature waited, and Holloway intended to make it answer. The passage twisted deeper into the earth, the air growing colder with every step. Holloway's flashlight flickered, the beam thinning as if the darkness itself resisted it. The journal from the bunker weighed heavy in his vest, its secrets pressing against his ribs like a second heartbeat. Riggs moved beside him, his breath fogging in the chill. "You think that thing was telling the truth? That command lied?" Holloway didn't answer. He pulled the journal free, flipping to the last legible entry. The words were smudged, the ink bleeding as if the page had been wept over. June 23, 1970. "Found the gateway. It's not a cave, not a bunker. It's something else. Something that was here before the jungle, before man. The fog comes from it. The voices, too. They're not dead. They're somewhere else. Trapped. And they're hungry." The final line was underlined twice, the letters shaking. "Don't let it take you." Doc Harris leaned in, his face grim. "Gateway? You think he meant that altar?" Lawson's voice cracked. "You think Reyes is there? Wherever there is?" A whisper slithered through the passage, too close, too familiar. "Eddie, you left me." Lawson flinched, his hands flying to his ears. "Shut up, shut up." Holloway snapped the journal shut. "Keep moving." The passage opened abruptly into another cavern, this one smaller, its walls lined with jagged niches. Each alcove held a figure, frozen in place, their faces smooth and blank. Some wore tattered fatigues, others outdated uniforms, a few clad in rags that might have been French colonial or older. All motionless, all watching. Reynolds exhaled sharply. "It's a gallery." Riggs stepped forward, his flashlight beam trembling. "No. It's a larder." A sound echoed from the cavern's far end, a wet clicking noise like bone on stone. Holloway's rifle snapped up, the beam illuminating a hunched figure crouched atop a raised dais. The creature, its two long fingers curled around something small, metallic. Reyes dog tags. It tilted its head, the hollow pits of its eyes fixed on them. When it spoke, its voice was a chorus of the lost Reyes, Haskins, 100 others, all woven together. "You came back." Holloway's finger tightened on the trigger. "Where's Reyes?" The creature's grin stretched wider. "Gone, but not gone. Like the others, like you'll be." Doc Harris edged closer to Holloway, his voice low. "The journal mentioned a gateway. If we can find it." "You already have." The creature unfolded itself, towering over them, its shadow swallowing the torchlight. "You stand in its throat." The cavern trembled, the figures in the niches twitched, their blank faces turning toward the team in unison. Holloway made the call, "Fire!" Gunshots shattered the silence, muzzle flashes lighting the cavern in strobes. The creature shrieked, its body jerking under the barrage, but it didn't fall. It lurched, its limbs twisting at impossible angles as it scuttled along the walls like a spider. Riggs grabbed Lawson's arm. "Run, now!" The team bolted for the far passage, the creature's laughter echoing behind them. The walls shuddered, stone grinding against stone as the niches began to bleed, a thick black ooze that bubbled and hissed where it touched the ground. Then the whispers returned, not from the walls, from inside their heads. "Jack, you failed them all." Holloway gritted his teeth, forcing himself forward. The passage narrowed, the ceiling dipping low. A hand shot from the darkness, grabbing Harris by the collar. The medic barely had time to scream before he was yanked off his feet, dragged into a side tunnel. His flashlight spun to the ground, the beam illuminating his face for one last terrified second before the shadows swallowed him whole. Reynolds lunged after him. Holloway caught his arm. "We can't stop." The lieutenant's face was a mask of agony. "We can't leave him." The creature's voice slithered from the dark. "You already have." The ground beneath them trembled, cracks splitting the stone. Holloway shoved Reynolds forward. "Move!" They ran, the passage collapsing behind them, the creature's laughter ringing in their ears. The journal's words burned in Holloway's mind. "They're not dead, they're somewhere else." And as the walls closed in around them, Holloway realized the terrible truth. They weren't escaping. They were being herded. The jungle welcomed them back like a living thing, its vines snagging at their uniforms, its roots twisting underfoot as if to slow their escape. Holloway led the fractured remains of Bravo Team Riggs, Reynolds, and Lawson through the suffocating green, their breaths ragged, their weapons slick with sweat and fear. Behind them, the cavern's entrance had sealed shut with a groan of shifting stone, leaving no trace of the horrors within. No trace of Harris. No trace of Reyes. Lawson stumbled, his hand shaking as he reloaded his rifle. "We can't just leave them." "We don't have a choice," Riggs snapped, though his voice cracked on the last word. His fingers brushed the dog tags in his pocket. Haskins, Reyes's, the weight of them unbearable. Holloway checked the coordinates from Echo's map, his compass needle spinning wildly before settling northeast. Toward the river. Toward the last place Command might still be looking for them. The fog had receded, but the jungle was too quiet. No birds, no insects. Just the oppressive weight of unseen eyes. Reynolds wiped blood from a gash on his temple, his gaze darting between the trees. "You really think there's a way out?" Holloway didn't answer. The journal's final words haunted him. "Don't let it take you." But it already had. Piece by piece, it had peeled them apart, swallowed them whole. And yet, they were still breathing. A rustle in the undergrowth. The team froze, rifle snapping up. A shape moved between the trees. Not a faceless figure. Not a ghost. A man. Sergeant Vince Carter. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with dirt and blood. Delta Team's leader staggered into the clearing, his eyes wild. Holloway. Briggs' rifle stayed trained on him. "You led us into that fog." Carter shook his head, his hands raised. No, we didn't know." His voice broke. "They told us it was a rescue. They told us you were lost." Holloway stepped forward, his voice low. "Who's left?" Carter's throat worked. "Just me." A beat of silence. The jungle held its breath. A whisper. Not from the trees, from Carter's radio. "Vince, you were supposed to save us." Carter recoiled, fumbling for the device. His brother's voice. "Dead. In Laos." Holloway grabbed his arm. "Don't listen." Carter's eyes were hollow. "It's too late." The fog returned. Not from the ground this time, from the sky. It descended in thick, choking waves, swallowing the light, the sound, the air itself. The whispers surged, dozens, hundreds, all calling their names, all voices from graves long dug. Reynold backed into Holloway, his rifle trembling. "We run. Now." But the fog was faster. It coiled around Carter first, tendrils snaking into his mouth, his nose, his eyes. He didn't scream, he just dissolved, faded, became another whisper in the chorus. Holloway grabbed Lawson, shoving him forward. "Move!" They ran. The jungle warped around them, trees bending like ribs in a great heaving chest. The fog licked at their heels, the voices growing louder, more desperate. "Jack, you can't save them." "Tom, the water's so cold." "Eddie, why did you leave me to die?" Lawson sobbed as he ran, his brother's voice clawing at his sanity. Riggs fired blindly into the mist, the bullets doing nothing. Nothing. Then, a headlight. Not torchlight, not fire. Sunlight. The river. The edge of the jungle. Holloway didn't dare hope. He lunged for it, dragging Lawson with him, Riggs and Reynolds at his heels. The fog howled behind them, the voices rising to a deafening shriek. Then silence. They burst into the open air, collapsing onto the riverbank, gasping like men drowning. The fog stopped at the tree line, swirling angrily, unable to cross. For now. Riggs rolled onto his back, staring at the sky. What the hell do we do now? Holloway looked at the files in his pack, the proof of Command's lies, the names of the lost. He looked at the jungle, its green depths hiding something older than war, hungrier than death. Then he stood. "We go home," he said, "and we burn it all down." The river carried their reflections as they moved downstream, the water dark and endless. And somewhere in the jungle behind them, the fog waited, patient, hungry, and far from finished. The river's current carried them downstream, the jungle's edge receding into a green smear behind them. Holloway's hands ached from clutching the rusted dog tags, Reyes's, Harris's, the others they couldn't save. The weight of them was a constant reminder. They were the only ones left. Lawson knelt at the water's edge, scrubbing black grime from his arms, his breath still uneven. "We can't go back to Command. They'll bury us with the rest." Riggs checked his rifle, his jaw tight. "Then we don't go back. We disappear. Find a village, get word out." Holloway cut him off with a raised hand. His gaze was fixed on the opposite bank. The jungle there was different, thinner, the trees skeletal, their branches clawing at a sky that seemed too pale, and between them, a figure stood, motionless, watching. Reynolds tensed. Contact. 2 o'clock. The team raised their rifles, but Holloway's breath caught. The silhouette was familiar. Too familiar. The figure stepped forward into the light. Pale, hollow-eyed, uniform tattered but unmistakable. Reyes. Lawson's rifle clattered to the rocks. "Danny?" Reyes didn't speak. His lips moved, but no sound came out. His eyes were wrong, too dark, too deep, like pits dug into his skull. Holloway's pulse hammered. This wasn't Reyes, not really. But it wasn't one of the faceless things either. It was something in between. Riggs took a step back. "That's not him." Reyes, or the thing wearing his face, lifted a trembling hand, pointed downstream, then turned and vanished into the skeletal trees. The jungle sighed. The river murmured. And Holloway made his decision. "We follow." Reynolds grabbed his arm. "Are you insane? That's a trap." Holloway pulled free. "Everything in this place is a trap. But that's the first thing that's pointed instead of chased." Lawson hesitated, then scooped up his rifle. "What if he's trying to lead us out?" Riggs' laugh was hollow. Or to whatever ate him. They crossed the river in silence, the water icy against their wounds. The far bank was eerily still, the air thin and metallic. The trees here bore no leaves, their bark peeling like dead skin. And ahead, barely visible in the gloom, Reyes waited. Watching. Always watching. As they stepped onto the bank, the ground beneath them shifted, not earth, not stone, but something porous, something that gave slightly underfoot, like rotted flesh. Holloway's flashlight beam caught the trees again. They weren't trees at all. They were bones. Fused together, towering, their branches the splayed fingers of things too large to name. And nestled between them, a structure low, crumbling, its entrance yawning black. Reyes stood at the threshold, turned, and stepped through. The team hesitated at the edge. Then, from the darkness, a whisper. You wanted answers. Holloway exhaled, and followed. The air inside the structure was thick and stale, clinging to Holloway's skin like damp cloth. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing walls lined with deep grooves not carved but clawed. Reyes stood ahead, his silhouette flickering in the dim light, his back turned. Riggs kept his rifle trained on him, his voice low. If this is some kind of trick. Reyes turned slowly. His lips moved again, soundless. But this time, Holloway saw the words form. They've been here the whole time. Then the shadows behind him shifted. Figures emerged from the darkness, dozens of them. Their uniforms were tattered, their faces gaunt but unmistakably human. Holloway's breath caught as recognition slammed into him. Echo Platoon, or what was left of them. Corporal Haskins stepped forward, his eyes sunken, his skin stretched too tight over his bones. When he spoke, his voice was a dry rasp. Took you long enough? Reynolds staggered back. You're alive? Hoskins' laugh was a brittle thing. Alive? No, not for a while now. He lifted his sleeve, revealing skin mottled with the same black veins that pulsed through the walls. But we're still here. Holloway's grip tightened on his rifle. What is this place? One of the Echo soldiers, a private no older than Lawson, gestured to the chamber around them. The other side, the real jungle, his voice cracked. It's been feeding on us. On everyone who's ever gotten lost in these hills. Doc Harris's voice echoed in Holloway's memory. They're not dead. They're somewhere else. Riggs stepped forward, his hand shaking. Reyes. Harris. Are they... Haskins shook his head. Gone deeper, into the heart of it. His hollow eyes flicked to Holloway. But you can get them back. Lawson's breath hitched. How? A murmur rippled through the Echo soldiers. Then, from the back of the chamber, a figure limped forward. An old man in the tattered remains of a French colonial uniform. His face was a map of scars, his left arm ending in a gnarled stump. When he spoke, his accent was thick, his voice like rusted hinges. You break the cycle. Holloway's pulse pounded in his ears. How? The old man smiled, revealing blackened teeth. You give it something new to chew on. The chamber trembled. A low guttural groan reverberated through the walls, the sound vibrating in their chests. The Echo soldiers tensed, their hollow eyes darting to the ceiling. Haskins grabbed Holloway's arm, his grip ice cold. It's waking up. Reyes' silent lips formed one last word. Run. Then the walls moved. Not stone, not bone. Something alive. Something hungry. Holloway didn't hesitate. Back to the river, now. The team turned as one, sprinting for the entrance as the chamber convulsed around them. The Echo soldiers didn't follow. They stood their ground, their faces eerily calm as the darkness swallowed them whole. The jungle outside was no longer still. The skeletal trees thrashed, their branches whipping like angry limbs. The ground shuddered, splitting open in jagged fissures that exhaled sour, metallic air. Riggs skidded to a halt at the riverbank, his face pale. We can't outrun this. Holloway turned. The structure behind them was collapsing in on itself, the walls peeling back like rotting flesh to reveal a yawning, pulsing darkness at its core. And from that darkness, a sound, not a whisper, a heartbeat. The jungle held its breath. Then the river erupted. The water surged upward in a great heaving wave, not toward them but back, rushing into the fissures, flooding the crumbling structure. The heartbeat stuttered, the darkness recoiled, and for the first time the jungle screamed. Holloway didn't wait to see more. Swim! They plunged into the current, the icy water closing over their heads as the world behind them came apart at the seams. Somewhere in the chaos, Holloway could have sworn he heard Reyes' voice, not a whisper, not a plea, but a battle cry. And then the river took them. The river spat them onto the shore like discarded bones. Holloway coughed up brackish water, his vision swimming as he dragged himself onto the rocks. Around him the others gasped for air, Riggs clutching his side, Lawson retching, Reynolds staring blankly at the sky as if he couldn't believe it was still there. Behind them the jungle was silent. Not the eerie, watchful silence of before. Dead silence. The trees stood motionless, their leaves limp, the vines dull and lifeless. Even the air felt different, lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. Riggs rolled onto his back, his breath ragged. Did we just kill a jungle? Holloway didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the water's edge, where the river lapped sluggishly at the stones. Something dark floated just beneath the surface. Not blood, not shadow, but a thick, inky swirl that dissipated as he watched. Gone, but not forgotten. Lawson sat up slowly, his hands trembling. Reyes, Harris, Echo. Are they... A ripple in the water cut him off. Then another. Figures emerged from the river, their uniforms dripping, their faces gaunt but whole. Human. Reyes staggered onto the bank, his eyes wide, his breath coming in sharp bursts. He looked down at his hands as if he'd never seen them before. Then he looked at Holloway. You came back, he whispered. Doc Harris followed, then others, soldiers in tattered fatigues, their insignias marking them as Echo Platoon. Haskins was among them, his face no longer stretched with hunger, his eyes no longer hollow. Reynolds stood, his voice cracking. Haskins shook his head, his fingers brushing the dog tags at his throat. You broke the cycle. The jungle exhaled around them, a final shuddering breath. Then, a sound, distant but unmistakable. Helicopter blades. Riggs tensed. Command. Holloway's jaw tightened. The files in his pack were soaked but intact. Proof of the lies, the cover-up, the men fed to something older than war. Proof that could burn it all down. But the radios on their hips crackled to life before he could speak. Bravo team, this is command. We have your location. Extraction in 5. Prepare to debrief. The voice was calm, professional, like none of this had ever happened. Reyes met Holloway's gaze. They're going to bury it. Holloway knew he was right. Command would take them back, scrub their memories, stamp their files classified. Another platoon would vanish. Another cycle would begin. He looked at the others, at Lawson's hollow eyes, Riggs' clenched fists, Reynolds' slumped shoulders, at Reyes and Harris and the ragged remnants of Echo, who had already died once for this war. Then he made his choice. He unclipped his radio, held it over the water, let it drop. The others watched as it sank, the static dying in a final, muted gurgle. Riggs was the first to follow suit, then Reynolds, then the rest. The helicopters would come. They would search. But they wouldn't find them. Not this time. Holloway turned to the jungle, not the dead one behind them, but the living one ahead, vast and untamed. "Move out," he said, and Bravo team walked into the green. The fog did not follow. The jungle blurred around them as Holloway and Riggs dragged Lawson through the undergrowth, his legs barely working, his breath coming in ragged, panicked bursts. Behind them, the fog churned like a living thing, its tendrils lashing at the trees, swallowing the light. Reyes wasn't with them. Holloway had seen him turn back, seen him plant his feet in the mud, rifle raised, his face a mask of grim determination as the fog rolled in. "Go," he'd shouted. "I'll hold them off." There had been no time to argue. Now, as the team crashed through the foliage, the river finally in sight, Holloway's chest burned with more than exhaustion. Lawson stumbled again, his fingers digging into Holloway's arm. We can't leave him." "We don't have a choice," Riggs snapped, though his voice cracked. He risked a glance over his shoulder, his face paling. "Keep moving." The fog surged behind them, faster now, hungrier. Whispers slithered through the trees, voices they knew, voices that clawed at their resolve. "Jack, you always run." Holloway gritted his teeth and pushed forward. The riverbank sloped sharply, the dark water churning below. Holloway didn't hesitate. He half-dragged Lawson down the embankment, the mud giving way under their boots. Riggs followed, his boots skidding on loose rocks. Then the fog reached the tree line. It stopped. Just for a second. Just long enough for Holloway to see Reyes one last time, a silhouette in the mist, his rifle raised, his mouth open in a silent scream. Then the fog sealed shut, and Reyes was gone. Lawson collapsed at the water's edge, his hands shaking. "We have to go back." Holloway grabbed his vest, hauling him up. "We don't go back, ever." His voice was steel, but his hands trembled. "We move now." The river was their only chance. The fog didn't cross water. They waded in, the current icy and unforgiving, dragging at their legs, their gear. Lawson gasped as the water hit his wounds, but he didn't stop. None of them did. Halfway across, Riggs froze. Holloway. He turned. The fog hadn't followed, but something else had. Figures stood on the far bank, tall, gaunt, their faces smooth and blank, watching, waiting. One raised a hand, fingers splayed, as if in farewell. Then the river pulled the team under, and the world dissolved into darkness. The chopper blades thundered overhead, whipping the tall grass into a frenzy as the extraction team descended. Holloway sat on the damp ground, his hands resting on his knees, staring blankly at the blood caked beneath his nails. Riggs paced nearby, his jaw clenched so tight, Holloway could hear his teeth grinding. Lawson sat curled in on himself, rocking slightly, his eyes hollow. A medic crouched in front of Holloway, shining a light into his pupils. "Sergeant, can you tell me what happened out there?" Holloway didn't blink. "We got lost." The medic hesitated, then glanced at the officer standing behind him, a sharp-faced captain with cold eyes and a clipboard. The captain nodded once, and the medic backed off, moving to check Lawson's vitals instead. The captain stepped forward, his voice low. "Sergeant Holloway, HQ has reviewed your mission logs." Holloway finally looked up. "Have they?" The captain's expression didn't change. There was no fog, no figures, no missing platoon. Satellite scans confirm no anomalous weather patterns, and Echo Platoon was never deployed to your sector. He tapped his clipboard. "You and your men experienced a shared hallucination likely due to contaminated water sources or enemy chemical agents." Riggs let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Is that right?" The captain ignored him. You're being reassigned to Firebase Tango for psychological evaluation. Corporal Riggs, you'll accompany them." Holloway stood slowly, his body aching in ways that had nothing to do with the jungle. "And Lawson?" The captain's gaze flicked to the private, who was now muttering under his breath, fingers twitching as if plucking invisible threads from the air. "He'll be taken to a secure facility for treatment." Holloway's hands curled into fists. The captain leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Listen to me very carefully, Sergeant. You saw nothing, you heard nothing. If you value what's left of your career, if you value your freedom, you will forget this ever happened." For a long moment, Holloway said nothing. The weight of the files still hidden in his pack pressed against his back. The echoes of Reyes' last shout rang in his ears. Then he nodded. The captain stepped back, satisfied. "Good. The chopper leaves in 5. As the officer walked away, Riggs moved closer, his voice barely audible. "We're just going to let them bury it." Holloway watched the medic lead Lawson toward the chopper, the private's vacant stare fixed on something no one else could see. "No," Holloway said quietly, "we're not." Riggs followed his gaze, understood. They boarded the chopper in silence. As the doors closed, Holloway looked down at the jungle one last time, green and endless, its secrets buried deep, but not forgotten. Never forgotten. The rot went all the way to the top, and Holloway intended to carve it out. Months later, Saigon was a blur of neon and sweat. The city pulsed with life, motorbikes weaving through crowded streets, vendors shouting over the din, the ever-present hum of a war that felt both too close and worlds away. Holloway sat at a corner table in a dimly lit bar, nursing a glass of whiskey that did nothing to dull the memories. The files were gone, buried where no one would find them. The official story held Bravo team had suffered a breakdown. Lawson had been shipped stateside to a quiet hospital with no visitors. Riggs had vanished 2 weeks after debriefing, leaving only a note. Gone hunting. Holloway had stayed, waiting, watching. The bar's door swung open, letting in a burst of humid air and raucous laughter. A group of soldiers stumbled in, their uniforms rumpled, their faces flushed with drink. Holloway's grip tightened around his glass. Fresh meat. One of them, a lanky private with a busted lip, slumped onto the stool beside him. "Hey, Sarge, you look like you've seen ghosts." Holloway didn't answer. The private shrugged, signaling the bartender for another round. "Yeah, well, join the club." A bottle of cheap bourbon landed between them. The private poured 2 glasses, sliding one toward Holloway. "To the ones we left behind, huh?" Holloway's jaw clenched. The private didn't seem to notice. He leaned in, his breath sour with alcohol. "You ever hear about the platoon in the fog?" The glass stopped halfway to Holloway's lips. The private smirked, mistaking his silence for curiosity. Yeah, I know officially it never happened, but my buddy swears he saw them. Out near the Highlands, whole unit just standing there in the mist, faces all wrong, like they'd been erased. He took a swig, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Crazy, right?" Holloway set his glass down carefully. "What else did your buddy say?" The private blinked, surprised by the question. "Not much, just that they were calling to him. Sounded like his brother who's been dead since 65. He laughed, but it was a shaky thing. "Hell of a way to go, huh? Lost in the fog." Holloway stood, tossing a handful of piastres onto the bar. "You should forget you ever heard that story." The private frowned. "Why?" "Because some things," Holloway said quietly, "are worse than dying." He walked out into the neon-lit night, the private's confused stare burning into his back. The city swallowed him whole, another shadow among thousands. But the jungle wasn't done with him yet. Somewhere in the dark, the fog waited, and it was hungry. The air in Holloway's hometown was thick with the scent of autumn crisp leaves, wood smoke, the faint tang of distant rain. He sat on the porch of his childhood home, fingers wrapped around a lukewarm beer, staring at the tree line beyond the empty street. The doctors had called it PTSD. The discharge papers had labeled him unfit for duty. The nightmares had other names. A breeze stirred, carrying with it the faintest whisper of damp earth and something older. Holloway's grip tightened on the bottle. No, not here. He stood, scanning the quiet neighborhood. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across the pavement. Nothing moved. Then, a tendril of mist curled around the base of the nearest lamppost. Holloway's breath caught. It slithered forward, slow but deliberate tendrils creeping across the asphalt like probing fingers. The streetlights dimmed as the fog thickened, swallowing the light whole. His pulse hammered in his throat. Impossible. The jungle was half a world away. Yet here it was. The fog reached his driveway, pooling at the foot of the porch steps. Holloway backed up, his hand instinctively reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. Then, a whisper. Soft. Familiar. Jack. His father's voice. Holloway's knees nearly buckled. He hadn't heard that voice in years, not since the funeral, not since the letter that had arrived 2 days too late. The fog swirled, forming shapes, a hunched figure, an outstretched hand. You left things unfinished. Holloway's boots hit the door behind him. His fingers fumbled for the knob. The figure in the fog stepped closer. No. Lurched. Its limbs too long, its movements all wrong. And where a face should have been, nothing. Holloway wrenched the door open, stumbling inside. He slammed it shut, locking it with trembling hands. The fog pressed against the windows, blotting out the streetlights, the world, everything. The house phone rang, a shrill, jarring sound in the suffocating silence. Holloway didn't move. It rang again, and again. On the fourth ring, he snatched it up. No one spoke, just breathing. Slow. Wet. You can't hide forever, Jack. The voice wasn't his father's anymore. It was Reyes. The line went dead. Outside, the fog howled, and Holloway knew. It had followed him home,